Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Very late. Good evening. I understand.
Good evening.
You are in China. You are in India. I understand.
That's right. Yes, I'm in Mumbai.
I see. So, what is a new China? Which country is a new China for next 20 years?
What will happen in China in the next 20 years, did you say? That's a difficult question.
Well, is China still too cheap to short, too large to ignore?
Yes, this is the story now. Looking at the global situation, you have a China now which is receding into a centralized communist state. You must remember the reason why China is where it is today is because of the policies taken by Deng Xiaoping. If you remember, Deng Xiaoping said, I don't care if the cat is black or white, as long as it catches the mouse. And he also said, to become wealthy is glorious. These statements meant that China was embarking on a free enterprise system, a capitalist system, and that put China on the map. Now, unfortunately, China is moving back into a communist single-story state. In other words, they are strengthening the role of the Communist Party. The Communist Party will lead the economy, and therefore the private enterprise system is gradually going to be breaking down. It's a real problem. Now here in India is the opposite situation. India is a very democratic environment. A lot of people ask me, is India really democratic? You just have to turn on the television set. You have 50 or 60 different channels with completely different political views. And of course, India is a place where that you have many states. I like to call it the United States of India, not India, because they're very different. They have different languages, even different written languages. So it's a quite creative situation here in India, a very democratic, creative situation, and a capitalist society. That's why India is growing at something like 6 or 7%. I know that Czech Republic, I think you were growing in Czech Republic at about 2%. US is happy to be 3%, but now India is growing at 6 or 7%, which is incredible. So you have these two different ways of running an economy, and I believe that the democratic capitalist systems will win out at the end of the day.
You always stressed in your investing to companies the need to understand the owners. Do you think you can understand Indian owners?
Oh, definitely. I was just visiting today a company here. We sat down speaking English. By the way, in any business here in India, they speak very good English, so it's easy to communicate. And they were very open. They showed me what they were doing. They had the balance sheets and the profit loss statements and so forth. It's quite open and quite good.
Turning to global, do you remember the times of similar geopolitical tensions, and what are the asset classes you would recommend in such times?
The asset, a lot of people look at the asset classes in the equity market, at least, in a vertical way. In other words, it can be in consumer, you can be in banking, you can be in technology, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't look at it that way. What we do is say, okay, you've got these different industry sectors, but across these, you've got to look at the technology. What is the use of technology for each of these sectors? So the first thing I do when I meet a company is ask them, what technology are you using to improve your profitability and to improve your efficiency? And of course, one of the great strengths of the Czech economy, as you know, is technology. In other words, you are doing terrific work in machine building, in electronics, et cetera, et cetera. And that is the real strength going forward. The way people use technology, that's the growth. That's the creative growth in industry.
You see some technological advantages of current Europe? Do you see companies in EU that you find technologically advantages?
Of course, there are terrific technology companies in Europe, and they will continue to grow and spread their wings globally. As you know, you have German companies, Czech companies, companies all over Europe that not only are in Europe, but in the United States, in other parts of the world, in China, in India, etc. So there's no question that Europe has an incredible education system which generates this technological superiority, which is, I hope this will continue going forward.
Super. That's very important for us because we've been quite skeptical here in the morning about Europe. May I ask you one few questions on politics? You supported Donald Trump in latest presidential elections. Do you think the world would be better with him, and how would the world be better with him?
Well, I like Donald Trump because of his very frank and let's say maybe innocent way of looking at things. So you get what he says. In other words, he doesn't beat around the bush, so to speak. He says what he thinks. But I probably would be concerned with his policies, and I probably would think twice about voting for him if I was American voting, because he's not eager to support Europe and Europe's defense. And that's a problem. I think that is something that would not be good for the world.
I see. And which other regions you find attractive? I understand you've been doing more in Africa, in Kenya. That's
yes, we have one company in Kenya that is doing the banking, internet banking system. Actually, it's a telecoms company. It's called Safaricom, and they have a system of money transfers throughout the country, and it's quite an innovative, creative system. By the way, it's a good example of where in emerging markets you can find some very creative and innovative systems. So Kenya is one example of that. But the biggest allocation we have now is Taiwan. And that's because of technology that Taiwan has. We invest in the so-called fabless companies, companies with no factories, but have software. In other words, they design the chips, the semiconductors. And these companies are quite profitable. And the good things, of course, it's all about brain power. So that if something happens, if China decides to invade, these people can fly out at a moment's notice. So it's a better way to invest rather than investing in a company with factories.
And aren't you afraid about China-Taiwan conflict?
Yes, of course, it is a concern, but I think the concern has diminished substantially for a number of reasons. First of all, the Chinese economy is not doing well. Xi Jinping is under pressure politically, internally, and the U.S. has stepped up its bases in the Philippines and in other parts of Asia. Japan has joined hands with the U.S., India, and Australia to form an alliance. So all of these factors will make it very difficult for China to invade Taiwan.
Well, I'm not here that long, but I remember some countries, elites resorting to conflict because they had economic problems, not in spite of that.
Very good point. I think that's a very good point. But from what we see within the Chinese military, there's not much enthusiasm for a fight with the U.S. at this stage, at least.
And I read your last book on inflation myths. Would you change anything in that book if you could now, after a few inflationary years?
Well, the book's name is The Inflation Myth and the Wonderful World of Deflation. And basically in the book, I say, the reason why I say inflation is a myth is because the way inflation is measured is very faulty. It's a very faulty measure. When you look at the consumer price index, it really doesn't tell you the true story. The true story about inflation is money supply. If money supply goes up by 30%, which it did during the COVID period, inflation is going to follow. Inflation will be that high. So that's one thing. The inflation measures are not really reflecting what is really going on. Number two is that despite the fact, and by the way, related to inflation, of course, is the devaluation of the currency. If there's too much money being printed, which happens during inflation, the currency becomes less valuable. So, but the wonderful thing is because of technology, people have now been able to overcome the devaluation of their currency because of the improvements in technology. For example, when I was doing my PhD at MIT, I didn't have the internet. I had to type it on a Selectric typewriter, 6 copies, making corrections. Now we can go into the internet, get all the information free of charge. I can go into Word, spell check, grammar check, all these facilities for nothing. So these are the kinds of changes that have taken place and have improved the lives of people. So in fact, even though prices have gone up, the technology have surpassed these prices and made life better for people. So basically, my book is rather optimistic.
For an economist, you are effectively saying that real wages are going up no matter what happens with the money. That's
Exactly.
the point. That's definitely a good thing, except it was not so for middle class in developed countries, at least in a period of say 88 to 2010. Their real wages went down in many countries.
Yes, of course, people see the prices go up and they say, God, the price of my gasoline has gone up by 15, 20%. But they fail to recognize that their automobile has become much more efficient in utilizing that fuel. And of course, now you've got electric vehicles, which present another incredible improvement to the lives of people.
Will your next book going to be about?
The next book is going to be about central bank digital currencies, because as you know, with the cryptocurrency boom that we're facing now, central banks have got to start thinking about creating their own cryptocurrencies. And we believe that, we know that a number of banks are thinking of adopting the so-called central bank digital currencies. So that's going to be a very interesting development.
Are you optimistic about this? Because the confidentiality of transaction was something taken as granted with paper money, and it worked quite nicely. I must say, I'm ex-central banker. I know that this paper money technology is actually very inexpensive and secrecy is almost assured. Yeah?
Yes. Well, the thing is that the central bank digital currencies are very attractive for some governments. For example, the Chinese government would like to introduce their central bank digital currency. Why? Because they will then be able to specify what people can spend the money on, when they can spend it, and how much they can spend. You know what I mean? They'll be able to control how people are using money. Now, of course, a lot of people are not going to like that because it's a system of control. And so there is quite a lot of opposition to so-called central bank digital currencies for that reason.
And may I ask one more personal question? I noted your name is on a list of people that gave up U.S. citizenship.
Yes.
Why did you do so?
It was tax. It was about tax.
Taxes.
As you know, as you know, if you're a Czech citizen and you go to work in Dubai, the Czech government will not ask you to pay taxes. Is that correct? But the U.S.
If I stay there for more than half a year, I'm out of the tax system.
Exactly. But if you're an American citizen, you have to pay taxes regardless of where you are and how long you stay there. So I was in a situation where I was living overseas outside America for over 40 years. And it was crazy for me to be paying, at my tax bracket, it's about 30-40% of my income. So I decided this did not make sense. And of course, you must remember the founding fathers of America revolted against the British government because of taxation without representation. So I figured I'm going to behave like the American pioneers.
I understand that. You lived in many countries. Which country did you enjoy in particular?
That's a very difficult question for me because I like almost every place I've been. I've been to the Czech Republic. I love it there. I love India here. I love China. I'm living in Dubai now. I love Dubai. It's it's all about people. If you really pushed me, maybe I would say Brazil, Rio de Janeiro during carnival time is a nice place to be. But even there, you don't want to stay too long.
Brazil, economically speaking, was more of a disappointment for over the years than a pleasure to be in. Is your experience as an investor similar?
Did you say in investments?
Yeah. As an investor, did you find Brazil fine?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Well, travel.
Because I know I have a friend who is half in Brazil through the company he works with, and there are quite a lot of restrictions. They are pretty protective about their home markets and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, one of the things I've learned in the years that we've been investing is that it's very important to travel. You have to meet people. You have to understand what they're doing. You have to look them in the face. And I found that I could be a better investor by travel. Now, of course, as you mentioned, lots of restrictions, one direction or the other. Each government has all kinds of restrictions. Here in India, there are many restrictions on where you can invest, how much you can bring in, and so forth and so on. But you can overcome them and you can make some very good investments. In fact, we've made the most money this last year in India rather than any other place. That's why Taiwan and India are our biggest countries.
And are you more looking for companies which are purely technological or which are trying to apply a technology now to some kind of old field of
I look for companies that are using technology to improve their performance. So, for example, here in India, we're invested in a company that makes steel tubing for construction, and they use technology in their manufacturing to improve the quality and lower the costs. So that's an example of a company that we like. But we're also invested in a software company. We're invested in a company that does mapping. Uber and these other services need maps, and this company does mapping of all the Indian states. So it's really about technology. That's really the key.
Well, I will give you a chance for one question from the auditorium. Is there somebody willing to? 1, 2, because I understand your time is pretty limited now. Please, but just tell me a question. I will put it in a microphone so
higher for longer, or
Do you expect interest rates to stay high for longer, or do you?
Yes, I believe that interest rates in America will probably stay at these levels. And the reason why I say that is you must remember the American economy is now getting a boost because of the Israeli war, the Ukraine war, the tension in the South China Sea. So a lot of the military spending now is picking up in America. And of course, there's also semiconductor investments, trillions of dollars are going in. So I believe that there'll be pressure on wages to rise, and therefore it'd be very difficult to bring inflation down quickly. So I think probably this level, 5%, will probably be maintained for a while now.
Okay, thanks. Some more questions? I see the hand down. Please, shout.
okay, so let me ask you, because I'm working with young people investing in their potential, what would you recommend how to start, where to invest when they don't have money, or even when young families have a mortgage, where to start, for example?
How to start investing with little money? Do I understand? Yeah? Or no money? No money. That might be difficult. That might be difficult. Little money. Well, what would your advice be for a normal family, young family?
Normally, for people that don't have the time to visit companies and evaluate companies, the best way is to invest in funds, in ETFs, exchange-traded funds, or in active managed funds. Actually, I advise people to put half of their money into index funds, in other words, funds that follow the index, and half into actively managed funds, good managers who have a good track record. That's probably the best thing. But also very important to be globally diversified. So if you're in the Czech Republic, okay, you may want to put half of your money in the Czech market, but the rest you should put into the international market and buy funds that are globally diversified.
Okay, so to be global even with a small money, I understand. Well, it seems to me that from my measure of time we are about to end, which is I think a nice way to end up with. So let me thank you a lot for being with us on a big screen, and thank you for your answers. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you in lovely Prague. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.